In the Perspectrum podcast, we discuss controversial topics. Outside of this context, Michael and I are both working professionals. While doing this show, we are not acting as agents or representatives of our respective institutions, and none of the views that we express reflect the outlooks of our employers. So don't come to my office and throw toilet paper at me.
And I don't have an office, but don't come to my cube.
Welcome to the Perspectrum. I'm Nathan Seelove.
And I'm Michael Bloom.
And we have a super exciting episode to share with you all today. We are going to start off by talking about the amazing news of the amazing pick of Tim Walz as the vice presidential candidate, which is literally what I wanted. It was I asked for it. It was specifically that I asked for. I really am starting to become convinced that Biden and Harris have been listening to our podcast.
I mean,
they've been taking our advice.
Exactly. We should like embed something like a Trojan horse into our podcast so that if they act on it, we'll know. We're like the only people that recommend it.
It's been kind of crazy. It's been kind of crazy, like how many times over the years you and I have talked about the Democrats need to start doing this. Oh my God, Democrats, please, for the love of God, do this.
Yeah.
And it's like they're fucking doing it. And it's amazing.
It is a nice feeling to have Democrats actually do what you think that they should do. That's pretty nice.
And not only that, but for it to work. But we will talk about all of that. And then for our second segment, we're going to talk about whether or not Harris is going to be better on the issue of Gaza, which I think is going to be a really interesting conversation. That overall, I will say the tone of this episode is going to be much more hopeful. I
think that's
mostly.
Right. Yeah, mostly. Whenever you're still talking about Gaza.
Yeah. And the second segment, I think that there's some win some, you lose some when it comes to that topic. But of course, whenever you talk about Gaza, it's not going to be like in the context of right now. It's not going to be a super hopeful thing, but it might be more hopeful than the current situation. But we will talk all about that when we get to Gaza. But first, Michael, I am going to toot our own horn because we fucking called it.
Dude, I mean, it's all you, honestly. Like this credit is all yours. I feel like when we were first talking with Jerry, you called out like, hey, the person I'd love from a policy perspective is Tim Walz. But that's probably not going to happen because, Harris is probably going to be the default kind of nominee, but I'd love him as a vice presidential candidate. And I was like, no, Nathan, nobody knows who that is. That's like totally obscure. Like they need name ID. They can't do Tim Walz. And lo and behold, there he is. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz.
Well, the thing is, we talked about Tim Walz. It was a while ago. We did a good actually, where we actually laid out all of the amazing policies that with a one-seat majority, they passed in Minnesota. That Tim Walz signed into law in Minnesota. He did more with a one-seat majority in the Senate of Minnesota than Democrats have been able to do with a supermajority in states like California or New York.
Yeah.
He has been he was hands down the most effective governor in the country.
Yeah.
All right. Probably I'd probably go so far as to say he is the best governor in the country. So he's been someone that we talked about him back then, and he's someone that we've kind of been looking at for a while.
Yeah.
And when Biden dropped out, obviously I had mentioned one of my first thoughts was, okay, who would my ideal pick be? Well, obviously it would be the best governor in the country. I mean, I love people like Bernie Sanders, but I really do think we're at the point where Bernie Sanders is too old. And also if Biden drops out because he's too old, you're going to bring someone in who's 1 or 2 years older. I don't think that's going to go over well. So yeah, it just made sense to me for someone like Tim Walz to be elevated. And it turns out they were listening.
Yeah, pretty exciting. So we should dive in and talk a little bit about Tim Walz, because despite your fanatic awareness of this Minnesota governor, he's probably not that well known to most people. So we should talk a
Yeah.
little bit about him.
Well, to be fair, I also lived in Iowa for 2 years.
Sure,
So like,
much closer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tim Walz is obviously, as we mentioned, the Minnesota governor. He has really become quite a phenomenon in terms of his ability to articulate both the benefits and strengths of and demonstrate the benefits and strengths of like democratic and progressive policies, while seeming and really being like very relatable and very kind of like normal, and like making it clear that so many quote unquote US like quote unquote progressive policies are actually just table stakes, like normal like normal things for governments to do for their citizens. And his like ability to talk about these policies and get them done, and to talk about how strange it is for the Republicans to emphasize like so many of the culture war issues that they do, has really like put him on the map, and is responsible, it seems, for a lot of the like positive kind of cultural attention that he's having in this moment. But to Nathan's point, at the same time, he's got a tremendous amount of like actual like policy backing and good like policy execution and governing work that like we can point to and be like, yeah, not only is he cool and folksy and everybody's dad, he's also effective and progressive and gets the right shit done. So he's kind of the whole package from an older white dad perspective.
So let's go into some of his background. This is a guy who was in the National Guard for 24 years. He was a high school teacher in Minnesota. He was a high school social studies teacher, which that's something that I love. I love how he got his start basically teaching kids about government. I know that some of my high school social studies teachers were some of like the best teachers I ever had. He coached football, which is like, I don't know how you get much more, hardcore America than that.
And on top of that, he's a veteran. Talk about America.
Yeah.
He spent 24 years in the U.S. Army National Guard. So he joined when he was like 17 and was like in the National Guard for a long enough time that he was able to like get a full pension, like 20 years in the National Guard. That's crazy. And so as he was in the National Guard, he was a teacher and a football coach. And then in 2005, he retired from the U.S. Army National Guard to run for Congress.
And he won in a district that hadn't sent a Democrat to Congress since like the 1800s.
Yeah, crazy.
Like it is a deeply red district to this day. The tiny instances in which it was blue was when he was with them, which is one of the reasons why I think it's funny that when Kamala Harris first picked him, you had all of these media outlets saying, "Oh my God, he's too progressive. He's never going to appeal to Republicans." Motherfucker, he's been appealing to Republicans.
Yeah, seriously.
Like this guy has been appealing to Republicans for his entire career. And what's interesting is like during Congress, while he was in Congress, like he was cast as a moderate. And in many ways, he was more moderate. He was definitely more moderate on the issue of guns. He actually had an A rating from the NRA.
Mm-hmm.
But in a lot of other issues, he did buck the standard establishment positions, but in a good way. Like, for example, when he was on the Veterans Affairs Committee, there was that escalation in Syria where Assad had used chemical weapons on his own people, which Obama said was basically his red line. So there was a question up in the air as to whether or not we would go to war with Syria, and he actually led the charge to keep us out of war with Syria. And as we know from recent history, we didn't go to war with Syria. So you can basically thank him for that, which is another thing that I love about the fact that he's being elevated on the vice presidential ticket, because he has a history of being anti-war. And the fact that Kamala Harris is picking him shows that hopefully that's the direction that she wants to go into as well. So he might have been more moderate in Congress, but there was still a lot of things that he was like, that I think that he was right on, that most Democrats were just not right on.
Yeah. Including a vote in 2016 where he voted for what turned out to be a failed attempt, but an attempt to repeal the authorization of military force from 2001. So kind of goes along with that, like, you know, anti-war record. Although he did in 2007 vote to continue to fund the war in Iraq, his position obviously, I guess, changed in 2016, which makes sense. It's fucking a long time later. Yeah. And that's the thing, to Nathan's point, like, he has this kind of broad appeal, but a lot of his, and I think partially because his positions seem to be relatively common sense, and somehow they don't get mired down in these like highly partisan battles about these positions. He also had a good record on LGBTQ issues when he was in the House. So he supported and co-sponsored iterations of the Respect for Marriage Act, which was legislation that sought to repeal the Defense of Marriage Act, which had barred the federal recognition of same-sex marriage. And so and that support for LGBTQ rights is like a pretty consistent part of his record, even from when he was a school teacher. He was the faculty advisor that helped his high school establish its first gay-straight alliance in 1999, and which is like, you know, well before most people in politics anyway were supporting LGBTQ issues, even like basic ones like gay marriage.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that I think really does speak volumes on the fact that this is a principle for him. You know, there are many politicians that flip-flop on issues when they become popular, but the best way you can tell which ones are serious and which ones are not, what did they do before they were in public life? All right. For example, we often sing Bernie Sanders' praises because he was an activist long before he was in public life. He was arrested on the University of Chicago campus for protesting segregation at the time. Tim Walz started a gay-straight alliance. He was the faculty, I guess, sponsor, the faculty head of the gay-straight alliance. And he specifically did it because he was like, look, it's going to speak volumes if me, this football coach, is showing support. Because he wanted to make sure that those students were not getting bullied. All right. That shows some actual character. That shows some actual principle. And let's talk about some of the stuff that he accomplished when he was governor. So we've gone through the laundry list of amazing policies that he passed when he was governor. And the thing is, a lot of people, again, Republicans and people in mainstream media have been trying to cast this record as, oh, this is too progressive. This is too radical. This is something that's going to turn off, the average voters. To be clear, that is a fucking lie told by people that apparently are illiterate when it comes to reading polls. So I actually, so you didn't have to, I actually went through a huge amount of the stuff that he passed and specifically found polling to see what the percentage of support is for each one. So let's actually go through those, and I'll even cite the prospective poll when I get to them. So universal school lunches, 60% support according to YouGov. Universal school breakfast, 57% support according to YouGov. He banned non-compliant clauses, 61 support according to Ipsos. He legalized marijuana, 57 support according to Pew. He passed a law to make it so they would go carbon-free electricity by 2040. 61% support, according to Pew. He passed paid family and medical leave. 80% support, according to Navigator Research. He banned gay conversion therapy. 56% support, according to the Williams Institute. He passed red flag laws for guns. 80% support, according to Fox News. He passed universal background checks. 87% support, according to Fox News. He passed automatic voter registration. 57 support, according to Pew. He passed tuition-free college for families under 80K. So 63% support making it completely universally free, according to research.com. So like this was actually the moderate version of what 63% of the country wants. He banned forever chemicals. 92% say that the government should require products to be proven safe before companies are allowed to put them in the market, according to Lake Research Partners. He increased K through 12 funding. 69% support, according to the American Federation of Teachers. He passed sectoral bargaining for nursing home workers. According to Gallup, 71% of Americans are pro-union. These are all well over 50% issues. Some of them are in the 80s, some of them are in the 70s. To try to cast his record as governor as being anything but a boon to this ticket, it is just fundamentally dishonest. You're just wrong. You are just wrong.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, yeah, those are some of like his most signature accomplishments, and they're badass. But the list like doesn't even stop there. That's the thing. Like with a one vote majority, able to like sign a bunch of these like really impactful, important laws that are, I mean, relatively common sense when you look at them, but that so few other people have been able to pass anything that even gets close to touching those. So like things like his administration put together a $1.9 billion investment in infrastructure projects in the state, specifically to drive obviously like infrastructure improvements, but then adding thousands of jobs to the state. He's got a great record on labor. I mean, to your point, you mentioned like some collective bargaining protections and paid sick leave. He also banned non-compete agreements and captive audience meetings. And captive audience meetings are mandatory meetings during work hours where employers are basically, they like force their employees to come in so they can argue against the establishment of the union. And so by banning those meetings, you can help support unionization efforts.
Yeah. This goes back to something that Michael and I have been screaming from the rooftops for basically our entire pod, which is makey people life better, makey people want votey for you. Not makey people life better, not makey people want votey for you. The thing is, when Democrats take the bait on culture war issues, it often does turn off moderate voters. All right? Depending on how they're talking about it. And depending on the issue. I mean, if we're talking about abortion, like, Democrats go all in on abortion, the country's with you on that. But you do want to be careful that you don't sound like a chastising college professor. And I say that as a college professor, when you're talking to voters. Like, you want to be careful that you don't sound like, let me tell you about how advanced everything I know is and how stupid you are. Like, that just doesn't come off well. This doesn't now to be clear, that doesn't mean that you abandon those social issues. That doesn't mean you don't talk about them at all. But what it means is that you make the emphasis of your campaign a strong progressive economic agenda, because we know that progressive economics are popular.
Yes.
When you go through each of these polls, which I just did, they are popular. And if you run on them, people will come to you. People will vote for you.
Yeah. I was going to say, the other thing that's like so cool about his record is that while he's got wins across so many of these areas, it's a good acknowledgement that like, you don't have to jump all the way to the end to make people happy. Incremental improvements really help people. Like, he signed this one bill, the Alex Smith Insulin Affordability Act, which provides emergency assistance to Minnesotans who are struggling to afford their insulin. Is this free universal insulin? No. Is this like a cap on the price of insulin universally? No. But you know what it does? Enables people who can't afford it a life-saving treatment, right? Life-saving medicine. And like, that's good. Is it good enough? Is it perfect?
Yeah.
No. That's good though. You know, like that's huge.
Yeah, no, I absolutely absolutely. Like, you probably could just make it free and that would still be popular, but you know,
but maybe
even when you don't go all the way, like, you're still helping.
Sure.
You're still doing something.
Yeah.
You're still actually getting something done. And again, this is all stuff that he's been able to get done with a 1-seat majority in the Senate. I cannot emphasize that enough.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, maybe it's possible to like, for someone to like, you know, make universal free insulin a thing, but maybe not with the cards he was dealt, but being able to make the best of it. And not sit on your laurels and not just be like, yeah, we're good. Democrats don't need to worry about governing because we're already, you know, winning in this state. Like, it's really impressive. And it clearly indicates like an interest in actually helping people. And at the same time, so this part kind of blows my mind. At the same time, he has balanced the state's budget and given tax cuts to over 2 million Minnesotans in 2019. And then, so before the pandemic, and then in 2021, included his 2021 tax bill included over $1 billion in tax relief and forgiveness for individuals and businesses that were suffering from the pandemic. So, like, you know, on top of all of this, literally giving people tax cuts, literally like, he's you know, somehow having the cake and eating it too, and as a result really fending off all of these, to your point, Nathan, all of these like attacks from the right.
Yeah. Well, and what's crazy about him, and this actually blew my mind. So he had the endorsement of AOC. You know who else he had the endorsement of, Michael? Joe fucking Manchin.
That's crazy.
This is a guy that is so popular in the Democratic Party that everybody from AOC to fucking Joe Manchin likes this guy. Yeah. Like, that's so unity. He's popular. He's firing up the base because he's super, you know, like he's super likable, super charismatic. Yep. This is the guy that also popularized just calling Trump and Vance weird.
Yeah. Totally.
Which I think is funny because that's kind of what gave him his national spotlight.
And I'm loving it, man. I actually love that approach. Like,
yeah,
you know, not only is it like just kind of folksy and relatable, it's like it totally takes the power out of their approach. Yeah. Like, being a strong despot is one thing. Being like silly, like looking like a fool, is never popular. Yeah. And so like the fact that you can like recognize like, oh yeah, it is fucking weird and silly and dumb that these people want to do all of these like things that are just kind of like, why do they want to ban porn? Like, what is the matter with them? Like, like, wait a second, this isn't like, I mean, it's fascism and we should fight against it, but it's also just like, fucking weird. I love that.
Well, and that's what I like, because the fact of the matter is, look, Donald Trump is a racist, sexist, xenophobic fascist. Like, full stop, hands down. Yeah. But the fact of the matter is, that sounds hyperbolic.
Yes.
Like, when you say it that way, whether it's true or not, it sounds hyperbolic. Yeah. But if you just kind of reduce it to, these guys are fucking weird, like, the average everyday American is going to be like, you know what? I remember that time that Trump used a Sharpie to alter a map. A weather map because of he got it wrong. That was fucking weird.
Totally. That's like that's a great point. It's believable. There is no argument necessary for it being weird. It's like, you know, that's true. I agree with that. Like, it's just not it's not about argument. It's a point that makes itself. It's great. And like, I don't know.
And
It's so
also,
funny to see the right flail about it. They're like, "Oh, we're not weird. Like you're weird." No, okay, resorting to schoolyard name calling, and it's like, that's
your guy is Trump.
yeah.
Like, you're resorting to schoolyard name calling. Meanwhile, Trump is like standing in front of a crowd saying, I don't know if I should call her Laughing Kamala or Lying Kamala. What do you think? Laughing Kamala or Lying Kamala? Come on. Like,
Yeah.
come on.
Yeah.
And the thing is, he is also popular. Like his 538 net approval rating is plus 4.5. Now compare that to JD Vance, his 538 net approval rating. It is a net unfavorability rating of fucking 9.
Yeah.
Like,
That's rough.
And since he's taken since he was put on the ticket, the Harris campaign has only surged. They are now ahead in or tied in almost every swing state. This has energized the campaign.
Yeah.
And look, the thing is, and I don't want to beat this dead horse too much because it's already been decided, but the reason why I was warning against somebody like Josh Shapiro, who I think would have helped in Pennsylvania. I do think he would have helped in Pennsylvania, but he would have only helped in Pennsylvania. And he might have helped, and he might have hurt in Michigan because they have a high Arab population that have been super critical about the Biden administration on the issue of Gaza. Meanwhile, Tim Walz was actually one of the first people who was calling for a ceasefire. Yeah. And he was one of the few governors that actually, when he spoke about Gaza protesters, he spoke about them sympathetically.
Yeah.
So the thing about Tim Walz is that he has that folksy appeal. He has that Midwestern appeal. He has that strong record of actually accomplishing stuff. He's an expert communicator. That's going to help everywhere. Yeah. Like, the strategy here is, how many of the swing states are you trying to win? If you want to maximize the number of swing states, you go for someone like Tim Walz.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Nathan, there is a skeleton in his closet, and unfortunately, it just makes him a totally disqualified candidate.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. So all this episode up to this point has been totally for naught.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, and that skeleton.
Okay. So lay it on me, brother. Lay it on me.
Ready?
I'm prepared. I'm prepared.
Okay. With no record to criticize because it's great, and no other skeletons, Republicans have had to resort to the most damning of all, criticizing his military record. Yep, 24 years.
Did he commit war crimes or something?
Could be worse. It's worse than that even.
It's worse than war crimes.
Okay,
let's see. Did he I don't know, did he kick a bald eagle or something while he was, deployed?
I wish. At the end of 24 years of service in
Okay, hold on. Wait a minute. I got it. I got it.
Yeah.
I think I got it. All right. He burned an American flag.
Oh, so much worse than that. I wish.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
At the end of 24 years of service in the U.S. Army National Guard, serving from when he was 17, he had the audacity to retire. Like a coward. In shame. My God.
Say what?
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. So Republicans have, as I mentioned, nothing to go on here in terms of criticisms of Walz. They've just had nothing land. So they're resorting to some pretty outlandish attacks on, I guess, some of his background. So one of the initial attacks that they attempted to put out was that he abandoned his unit prior to them going to the war in Iraq. So the claim is that he decided, or decided that he wanted to bow out of military service right before his team. He wanted to abandon his team right before they went to Iraq to fight in the war.
So let's, before we get into the fact checking of
Yes.
that, let's take that at face
Sure.
value. All right. Let's take it at face value. Assume that what they're saying is correct. Both Donald Trump and JD Vance have condemned the Iraq War.
Mm-hmm.
They've called it a mistake. All right. The Iraq War is nearly universally considered to be the worst foreign policy blunder of the last, since Vietnam, basically.
Yeah.
All right. This was an offensive war that we went into under false pretenses. We were lied to by the government to go into it, that killed hundreds of thousands of civilians, cost thousands of servicemen their lives, bankrupted the country, and your criticism is that he didn't want to be involved in that? Are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah.
The very war that you say we shouldn't have been in, your criticism is that he didn't want to be involved in that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, go with that.
Yeah, totally. Exactly. That he might, first of all, there's no reason to believe that he retired in protest. But even if he had, that would be a very reasonable move. The other thing is, I just want to call out the timeline here. He retired in 2005. 9/11 was in 2001. So he had been serving in our military for multiple years by the time of his retirement. It's not like he was just ducking out of the military right as the war was getting started. We were at war for multiple years. So that's one point. The other thing is, to Nathan's point, there's no factual basis that he wanted to skip out before his unit was deployed. So he filed to run for Congress in February 2005, which was before his unit was notified that they could actually be deployed to Iraq. And so later on, after already filing to campaign for Congress, his campaign did issue a statement that he was still going to run, even though they had heard some rumors that his unit might be mobilized and deployed to Iraq. And then he retired in May of that year. So he was already planning to run for Congress. They put out a statement that he was going to still run for Congress, even though they might be deployed. And then he retired in May. And then his unit was mobilized in August 2005 and actually deployed in March 2006. So there's no temporal way for him to have gone, oh no, my unit's going to get deployed, let me duck out. He was clearly already made plans to run for Congress before there was rumblings about that. So totally factually false and a silly claim. And also just an asshole move. Why are you attacking the service members more than 2 decades of service? Because of when they retired.
And Walz's response to this, I think, was a great response, where he basically said, anybody who decides to take up the uniform should be respected. So all I have to say to everyone that served, including JD Vance, is thank you for your service.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that was a great response.
Yep.
That was a perfect response.
Exactly.
It's a factually it is a dumb. It's a dumb point. And look, even if he had gotten out because he didn't want to go to Iraq, I just like to point out, why the fuck were we sending National Guard people to Iraq?
Sure.
That's not what they're for. Mm-hmm. The reason why the Bush administration did that was because trying to issue a draft would have been political suicide.
Yeah.
You try to issue a draft, you needed more troops. And the only way you could get them was by basically borrowing them from the National Guard, which are supposed to serve in the United States.
Yeah.
And the thing is, he even was shipped off to Italy during Afghanistan to help with basically munition specialization. So he had been deployed overseas. Not obviously he didn't see any combat, but they had already kind of overstepped what they should be using the National Guard for before.
Yeah.
But again, the question you should be asking yourself is, what the hell are we doing sending the National Guard to go fight in Iraq?
Yeah. Yeah. Another angle of attack from the GOP has been focused on Walz's response to the protests surrounding or following George Floyd's murder in Minneapolis. And so, like, the right is saying things like Walz, quote, allowed rioters to burn down the streets of Minneapolis, which is a quote from J.D. Vance. And, quote, Governor Walz allowed Minneapolis to burn for days despite the President Trump's offer to deploy soldiers and cries for help from the liberal mayor of Minneapolis. It's basically the claim they're making is that Walz was too slow to call in the National Guard to quell the unrest that was occurring there as a result of the escalations around these protests.
Damn, Michael. I got to say, that's pretty damning. Like, the only way that could be disarmed, like an accusation like that could be disarmed, is if there was like something crazy, like a recording at the time of Trump praising his response. Like, that's the only way Walz could find his way out of this.
Yeah, seriously. Like, if he were to say something like, I don't know, like, quote, what they did in Minneapolis was incredible. They went in and dominated, and it happened immediately. That would really be damning, would really like quell that and really remove this whole stain from Walz's record. Or if someone from the Trump administration or something had called Walz like an excellent guy at the time, or had said that he doesn't blame Walz and he actually blames the mayor of Minneapolis, all of that would really undermine this whole attack from the right.
You know, that was oddly specific, Michael.
Well, I'm reading from a transcript of a recording from June 2020 of Trump.
Oh, shit. Damn, aren't I embarrassed? Don't I feel embarrassed?
Finger wagging at you. Yeah, basically, Trump has been praised Walz at the time for his actions and response, and to the protests, and in no way blamed Walz. Now, I think my reaction when I see that is like, oh, that's not good from the left. Like, I don't want Trump praising my guy from the left, but I think his hesitance was a good sign, and the way that he talks about it in retrospect is heartening. Quote, Walz said, quote, there were people out there in those streets who were in grief over decades of systemic racism. They saw murder. And there were people in those streets that didn't care, and people who didn't know who George Floyd was and meant to do harm. I had to make sure that I was clearly making decisions to create space for those folks to protest.
Yeah. See, juxtapose that with that time that Trump preemptively gassed a bunch of protesters so that he could go do a fucking photo op with a Bible in front of a church. Yeah. Like, look, was he maybe a little bit late? Maybe. I don't know. I honestly don't know, whether he was late or not. I don't know what I would have done. Mm-hmm. It's a difficult situation. Maybe he was wrong. But the fact of the matter is, I would rather have somebody who is weighing the consequences of calling in the National Guard on a civilian population.
Yeah.
And is trying to be careful, is trying to get more information, trying to make sure that there is an actual plan for the implementation of the National Guard before he is doing that, versus somebody who is gung-ho about it.
Yeah. Exactly. And Trump was all too gung-ho to try to call in the National Guard against protesters.
Yeah. So that criticism falls flat. It's dumb.
Yep.
Swatted aside.
So the criticisms from the right are weak and silly, and luckily they don't seem to be impacting polls at all at this point. They're just not landing in any way. There's probably like one criticism from the left that I wanted that we should probably call out.
Before we get to that, I want to talk about the final one that I want to bring up is Tampon Tim.
Oh my God.
Let's talk about Tampon Tim. So here's the accusation, right? The accusation is that Tim Walz signed a law that required the boys' bathrooms in the schools of Minnesota to have to be stocked with tampons. So when I first heard that, again, I took it at face value. And my initial reaction was, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, we know that half of trans youth in the last year, according to the Trevor Project, have attempted suicide. And we also know that one of the best ways of preventing that is to create environments both at school and at home that are welcoming. You're telling, like, your criticism is Tim Walz wanted less dead trans kids.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. The other
what a monster.
The other thing is like okay, we could bite the bullet of tampons in bathrooms. Like I saw like a tweet or something that was like, my brother, who I share a bathroom with, has been like using the bathroom in the presence of tampons for forever, and he's doing fine. Like, I don't think this is a problem, even if it were
like
true.
Like, what is the implication there? Like, what is that? Like, the worst that's going to happen is you're going to have some teenage boys that are doing, stupid shit.
Waste
with
some tampons, which,
like, but here's the thing. Like everything that we've talked about so far, this is also bullshit.
Yeah.
This is also bullshit inside of bullshit on top of bullshit. So what the law actually does, what it actually says, is it does not distinguish by sex or gender. It just says period products must be available to all menstruating students. And what legal experts have argued is that what this means is that a school could put tampons in the girls' bathroom and in a unisex bathroom, and boom, they're compliant. Or they could have them in the nurse's office, and boom, they're compliant, as long as everyone has access to them.
Yep.
And in fact, PolitiFact actually tried to go through various different reports, various different media reports, to try to find even one example of a school district in the entire state of Minnesota where they had tampons in the boys' bathroom, and they didn't find a single one. Now, theoretically, a school district could interpret this as, well, we better stock tampons in the boys' bathroom. Like, they could theoretically do that, but none of them have.
Yeah. Which, again, makes total sense because all the dumb teenage boys would just fuck with them and waste them.
Yeah. And like, look, about like a little bit less than 1% of Minnesota's age group of 13 to 17 was trans in 2022. Now, obviously, all trans people should be protected in school. They should have a welcoming environment, no matter how small the number is. But like, the idea is basically, you need to make sure that those are available to whatever person might be menstruating. Even if it is a trans, even if they are a trans boy, right? But you can be very easily compliant with the law by just having it in the nurse's office or having it in a unisex bathroom, and boom, you're compliant. So the idea that he is forcing tampons into the boys' bathroom, it's just a lie. It's just not true. It's fake.
Yep, and it'd be fine if it were true.
and let's also make this clear. They're criticizing him. They're criticizing him for a law that he passed that made sure that people had access to tampons, to menstrual products.
Yeah.
All right. Honestly, the fact that is not a universal thing, like the fact that we don't treat menstrual products the same way we treat toilet paper.
Yeah, seriously.
Is just fucking ridiculous. It is just blatant sexism. Like, every state should implement a law like this. It's just such a no-brainer for period products to just be readily available. Like, why?
Yeah.
Why? What are you doing?
Yeah, so the attacks on the right on Tim Walz are just pretty weak and pretty much garbage. There's like not really a lot of attacks from the left. I would say like the only thing that might get some attention from progressives is that Tim Walz vetoed a bill that would raise pay and improve labor conditions for like rideshare drivers in Minnesota.
Yeah.
So this was a bill that was introduced by progressives in Minnesota, and he ultimately vetoed it, which is like at first glance that's like, oh, that's a problem. How is he pro labor and like good for people while being bad for gig workers? Ultimately, like the case there is a little bit less clear. Like ultimately, it came down to a judgment call. The rideshare companies were threatening to back out of the state, and so ultimately, as governor, he had to make the call of whether to try to bite that bullet and take them out, like take that gamble that they would, and these gig workers and rideshare workers would be, you know, out of a job, or or to like not sign the bill and kind of cave to that. But ultimately in 2024, he and the legislators were able to broker a deal that actually kept rideshare companies in the state while offering some pay increases and improved labor standards. Not as generous as the ones that were originally part of the 2023 deal that he vetoed, but some improvement. And then also the city of Minneapolis was actually able to pass a successful ordinance of its own, which is similar to the improvements that were made that would have been made at the state level. So like a compromise, but a reasonable one.
Yeah. I mean, look, that's not the decision I would have made.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, you don't just bow to corporate interests.
Yeah.
Like you just when they come up to you and they say like we're gonna pull out of your state if you do this, be like, all right, fine, fuck you,
Yeah.
pull out.
Yep.
And then create a public option. Like,
yeah.
But the thing is, the big thing that we look at as red flags
Mm-hmm.
are instances where it is clear corrupt
Yes,
intention
exactly.
or a clear influence of corrupt special interests.
Mm-hmm.
And that just has not been, there's just not a lot of evidence that has impacted Tim Walz during any part of his career.
Yes,
Which is
call.
Remarkable.
Yep, that is such a great call, because like we talk sometimes about like caving to corporate interests. For the most part, that's caving to them because they have given your campaign or you a lot of direct or indirect money. In this case, it's like, well, I was having to stare down rideshare companies, and I had to make a call on what I thought was the best move. There's no corruption. There's no like payment here. There's no contributions to his campaign. And that's pretty remarkable. And now it's time for a more lighthearted segment, Tips for Good. So Nathan, why do we do Tips for Good every week?
Well, Michael, I am so glad that you asked because you see, Michael, we do Tips for Good every week because it went zip when it moved, bop when it stopped, brr when it stood still. I never knew just what it was, and I guess I never will.
Just like me and whatever that was. I have never heard those words in my life, or at least not in that order.
It's a John Denver song, or at least it's a song that he covered. I think it was written by somebody else,
okay.
but it
like
was
a children's
definitely
author maybe or something.
It's called "Marvelous Little Toy." It was one of my favorite songs as a kid.
Wow, there you go. I guess that it was a children's song.
And I actually just sang it to put my daughter to bed.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Because we actually had to interrupt our recording so I could put my daughter to bed. And you know what?
What?
When babies are asleep,
yes,
the world's a better place.
Yes, it is. It sure is. You know what?
Yeah.
Maybe we should just do that. Maybe we should just go to sleep. Oh wait, never mind. We have to do a tip for good first. Yeah.
We have to do a tip for good because actually, like, coincidentally, like, we have to make the world a better place.
Ugh, bummer.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's give it a shot.
All right. So, Michael, what is our tip for good this week?
Our tip for good this week is, despite all of the excitement around the Harris Walz ticket, but despite all the progress we've made on, like the likelihood that we're going to be able to avoid a Donald Trump presidency, despite all of the excitement and improvement in polling and all of the progress that we made in just a few weeks, remember that the election and a Democratic victory in 2024 is not in any way guaranteed. Like, yes, they're pulling ahead in some of the swing states, or at least neck and neck in the swing states, but this is still a complete toss-up election. There is no sense in which we can take our foot off the accelerator. This has got to be absolute pedal to the metal, because we have to elect the Democratic ticket. And even aside from that, we've got to also elect senators who are Democrats. We got to also elect Democratic House reps. Like, full court press still. Like, we should take a moment to be energized by the situation, to have hope, to have excitement, but we have to channel that excitement right back into action, because we just can't afford to lose. And even though it feels like we've made a lot of progress, all we've done is take it from way behind to neck and neck, and we've got to take it across the finish line.
And that's tips for good.
So for our next segment, we are again talking about the Harris Walz ticket, but specifically we are talking about what we might be able to expect from a Harris presidency with regard to the policy on the Israel-Hamas war and Gaza.
Yeah. As if you've been listening to our pod for a while, you know that you probably have an idea that the Biden administration's policy towards Israel thus far has been fucking atrocious.
Yes,
and that they've
absolute
literally
failure.
been complicit with atrocities.
Yep. Yeah, totally. Yeah, like, it's been 10 months since Hamas attacked Israel. There are still 120 Israeli hostages that are in Hamas captivity. Since then, nearly 40,000 Palestinians at least have been killed, according to the Hamas-led Gaza Health Ministry, whose figures are considered reliable by both the UN and the U.S. government. And that's just like the counted people. It is there, like, researchers think that the death toll is probably much higher. And yet the Biden administration has continued to say that they'd like to see a ceasefire and that they're optimistic that they can broker one, even though they have seen literally like zero success up to this point. Like, it is just totally a game of getting close and then pulling back, because it's pretty clear that Benjamin Netanyahu and also Hamas don't have a lot of interest in or at least have not been able to come to an agreement. And yet we continue to see the IDF like kill civilians, and the US continues to send like offensive military weapons to Israel, including restarting. They started to send again 500-pound bombs, which the Biden administration had suspended sending like 500-pound and 2,000-pound bombs to Israel back in May, because the airdropped like large bombs were so potentially harmful to civilians and so poorly targeted. And yet somehow something has changed such that, I don't know, they're no longer worried about the civilian casualties and have restarted to send these large bombs.
Yeah. So like just last week, which was the week of August 10th, the Biden administration announced that they were sending an additional $3.5 billion in aid to Israel for weapons and equipment. So the thing you need to understand is that the Biden administration is basically pretending that, oh, well, we're just trying to be peacekeepers. We're just trying to be the independent moderator between Israel and Hamas. And we don't have any power here. They just need to make the right decision. That is verifiably false.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
We have leverage. We have easy leverage. If we cut off weapons to Israel, we would force them to the negotiating table.
Yes.
But thus far, the Biden administration is refusing to do that. He is sending them more weapons, more money for offensive weapons to use against civilians. He is aiding and abetting a literal genocide.
Yep.
So the question is, how is Harris different? And the answer is better, but it's unclear how much. Like, so let's dive into it. First off, it's worth talking a little bit about her record. So she actually does have connections to AIPAC, which is one of the biggest pro-Israeli lobbies in the country. And before I continue, I do just want to make a few things very clear. Some of the standard disclaimers that we always try to do when we are talking about Israel. No criticisms that we make of the Israeli government should be generalized to the Jewish people or even the Israeli people. We are talking about the Israeli government. All right. They are the ones who are guilty of these atrocities.
And importantly, the ones that are putting literally the interests of Israel below their own. So like this is about, this is partly this is like about the preservation and protection of Israel and the Jewish people.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, you know, and of course, never mistake, critiques of Zionism as critiques of Judaism. Those are just two very different things. And of course, we condemn any violence or anti-Semitism that is carried out against the Jewish people, even if it is in a pro-Palestinian, in the name of being pro-Palestinian. It's wrong. It's unjustifiable. It's disgusting. Yeah. With all that being said, let's look at Harris's record. So, like I said, she has had connections with AIPAC. She gave a speech at the organization's conference in 2017, right after she was elected to the U.S. Senate. She has accepted money in the past from other Israeli lobby organizations. One of her first acts when she was in office was actually to introduce a resolution. This is all according to Vox. To introduce a resolution opposing the United Nations Security Council resolution condemning Israel. So that's not great. She has repeatedly, and she also has repeatedly upheld the fact that Israel has the right to defend itself, which is something that, like, I don't think anybody really is calling that into question in general. Yeah. But of course, the question is, what do you call self-defense? Totally. Like the Republican Party and a lot of the Democratic Party seems to think that, carpet bombing toddlers is how you defend yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like saying that Israel has a right to defend itself is a totally basic statement that everybody should be able to get behind. And at the same time is used by a lot of people as coded language for saying that Israel has a right to do whatever they want in Gaza.
Yeah. Yeah. And when there were protests outside Congress during Netanyahu's visit, which there absolutely should have been protests. Yeah. In fact, I still agree with, I think that the United States should have accepted the arrest warrant by the International Criminal Court and basically arrested him the moment he set foot on American soil, but that wasn't going to happen. Yeah. She condemned any individual associating with the brutal terrorist organization Hamas, which quote, has vowed to annihilate the state of Israel and kill the Jews, which, you're specifying, I'm condemning the people that are for Hamas and that are for killing Jews. The only critique that I would have of that response is just the fact that there are, like, a majority of the protesters were there because they were protesting the fact that we invited a war criminal to come and speak in Congress. The people that were burning the American flag, like, go ahead and condemn them. People that were vandalizing and putting up pro-Hamas stuff, because there was at least one example of pro-Hamas graffiti. Like, absolutely condemn that.
Mm-hmm.
But you also have to understand that these people are doing this for a reason. And one thing that I would like to point out is that she actually has expressed sympathy, more sympathy than Joe Biden ever did, for student protesters on college campuses. She actually said, she told The Nation, quote, "They're showing exactly what the human emotion should be as a response to Gaza.
Yeah.
There are things some of the protesters are saying that I absolutely reject, so I don't mean to wholesale endorse their points, but we have to navigate it. I understand the emotion behind it."
Yeah, totally. And she, seems to have intentionally not attended the address that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gave to Congress, although she did meet with him after the fact, privately, and which I think is a good move. Like, you have a diplomatic opportunity to try to appeal to the guy, but you don't have to attend and endorse like the things that he's saying and the fact that he's in Congress to begin with. And after that meeting, she said, quote, "I've said it many times, but it bears repeating. Israel has a right to defend itself, but how it does so matters," which I think is a really important part of that sentiment.
Yeah. And the thing that I think is probably the biggest indicator that I think she is going to be better than Biden on this is that the Wall Street Journal has reported that she does intend to replace several Biden administration officials who have basically been the main people behind the strategy and policy in Gaza. So she's planning on replacing, according to the Wall Street Journal, she's planning on replacing National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, which good, she should.
Good call.
Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, which good. And Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, which Lloyd Austin, his only credentials was like previous ties with a defense contractor.
Oh, great.
Like, he never should have fucking been in the administration in the first place.
Yeah, that's all good signs.
So yeah, the idea that she's planning on replacing those people specifically means that like that is a good sign. That is a very good sign.
Yeah, and even before she was the Democratic candidate for president, she signaled in a way that like is kind of hard to do when you're the vice president and potentially signaling a departure from your like president's strategy. Like, that's a weird position to be in. But she signaled, she was like the first person in the administration to call out for, or for, I should say, first like senior official to call out for a ceasefire in Gaza back in March, and then openly like criticized the Israeli government for the humanitarian catastrophe that they were causing. And she said that, quote, "The Israeli government must do more to significantly increase the flow of aid. No excuses. Our hearts break for the victims of the horrific tragedy and for all of the innocent people in Gaza who are suffering from what is clearly a humanitarian catastrophe. People in Gaza are starving." So, like, even earlier, like early on before Biden was calling for a ceasefire, like going out and calling for that. And then on top of that, the Politico reports that, quote, "As vice president, Harris privately expressed that the Biden administration needed to take a stronger stance against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as the civilian death toll mounted in Israel's war against Hamas." So this is like, kind of repeated emphasis that essentially Harris's perspective on the situation is different. Her weighting of the civilian death toll in Gaza, like, it seems like Biden's approach is like no civilian death toll could ever match the interests of Israel. But it seems like her perspective seems different than that, which is that like we have to weigh these two things and make the right call. And then importantly, she is openly kind of critical and distancing herself from Netanyahu, which is really a good sign, because Biden has had this kind of like embrace Netanyahu kind of strategy, which has clearly failed on all fronts.
Yeah. And one other thing that I think is interesting is that she does seem to understand when she does an oopsie on Israel.
Yeah.
Like here let me explain. So last week on Wednesday. She was giving a rally in Michigan, and there were some pro-Palestinian protesters that started interrupting her speech by shouting, "Kamala, Kamala, you can't hide. We won't vote for genocide."
Mm-hmm.
And her response was, "You know what? If you want Donald Trump to win, then say that. Otherwise, I'm speaking," which
Bad response.
is a terrible way to respond to that. Oh my God, that's a terrible way to respond to that,
Yeah.
especially in the state of Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, that is a horrible response. Like the thing is, yes, she does need to. She is in a kind of tough position
Yeah.
because she is part of the Biden administration.
Yeah.
Right. And it's hard to separate the fact that she's in the Biden administration. And it's difficult when the best thing you can do is completely, like, the best thing that she could do for herself politically would basically be to completely just disagree with the Biden administration and, you know, like do a complete abandonment of the Biden administration. But it's difficult when, you're kind of relying on the goodwill of the Biden administration in order to prop yourself up in the first place.
Yep. Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that that's an excuse. I'm saying that makes the calculus a little bit more difficult. So that was a bad response. And also, like, the proper response to people that are not sure if they want to vote for you because of Gaza is not to vote or shame people into voting for you.
Yes.
Like, that is the worst thing that you can do.
Totally.
We tried that with Hillary Clinton and look what happened. Like you really need, like, the thing is, when you're a politician, you cannot come across as somebody who thinks that you are entitled to other people's vote.
No one wants someone reminding them that they hate their choices.
Yeah. Like, the thing is, for the first time in this race, people are enthusiastic to support you, Harris.
Yeah.
Like, they're enthusiastic about it. All right. The whole, like, oh, you want Trump to win, then say that, is basically just saying, I know we're both terrible, but he's slightly more terrible. That was the Biden strategy. All right. But now that people are actually happy with their candidate, more people are actually happy with their candidate, you can't do the Biden strategy. But what's nice is that it seems like she realized that was a mistake. That was a stupid response.
Yep.
Because on Friday, just 2 days later, she was at a rally in Arizona, and there were people that were shouting, "Free Palestine, free Palestine." And she paused in the middle of her speech and she said, quote, "I have been clear. Now is the time to get a ceasefire deal and to get the hostage deal done." She said, "The president and I are working around the clock every day to get that ceasefire deal done and bring the hostages home. I respect your voices, but we are here now to talk about the race in 2024. And the thing is, when she said that, the entire crowd cheered.
Yeah.
And the thing is, when you said that, you unified people. Like, there were pro-Palestinian protesters that are begging you for a ceasefire, begging you to create to call for a ceasefire. And you gave them a response which said, like, I hear you. But then you also kept the crowd of people that were already on your side still on your side.
Yeah.
Now, and the fact of the matter is, wanting a ceasefire at this point is extremely popular in the United States. All right?
Yeah, of course.
From all the way back in February, which at this point, like, we've seen that as it got deeper, as the violence got worse, you saw more and more people supporting a ceasefire. This is all the way back in February. 67% of Americans supported a ceasefire and a de-escalation of violence in Gaza.
Yeah.
Now, the thing that she needs to do, like, the next step that she needs to do, and I'll explain why. The next step that she needs to do is she needs to either say she will cut off arms to Israel, or just do it when she's president.
Yeah.
Like either the threat of it or the actual doing of it will give her some leverage. Now you might say, well, hold on, Nathan. If she does that, then that's going to turn away moderates. Okay, well, let's look at what polling data has to say about that. All right. As it stands, 52% of Americans support stopping. This is according to the Center for Economic and Policy Research. 52% of Americans support stopping U.S. arms shipments to Israel versus only 27% that don't support it and 21% who are unsure. So basically, if you're in favor of continuing those arms shipments, you are doing it for the 27% of Americans, which, by the way, when you look at the breakdown of who those people are already supporting or who those people voted for in 2020, 62% of Biden voters said they want to stop the arms shipments. 14% of them said they don't. 14%.
Yeah.
All right. For Donald Trump, 30% of them said that they do, and 55% of them said that they don't. So a majority of Trump voters in 2020 don't want you to seize weapons.
Yeah. But you're not trying to get
them. Are those
them.
the people that you're not trying to get them?
Yeah.
You're not trying to get them.
Totally.
So you're trying to make sure that the key voters in Michigan, and there's a pretty good amount in Wisconsin as well, that you are not turning them off to you.
Yeah.
So I know that it's difficult because like that is going against what Biden's current policy is, but hey, you're the one who's running.
Yeah.
Not him.
Yep.
You're the one who's going to be president if you win, not him.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah. I would say two things on this topic. One is a point that I've made about Biden in the past, and I think is less true for Biden on Gaza, but more true. The signs are pointing that it's more true for Harris, which is that what we get with Harris is the opportunity to influence how she's going to respond to the situation. Because it's pretty clear she's not super it's not clear. Signs point to her not being super dug in on continuing the strategy of the Biden administration. While she hasn't said that she's going to stop shipments, while she hasn't said that she would end the U.S. policy of protecting Israel in front of the United Nations, or that her administration would respect the international arrest warrant or anything like that, some of her reactions appear to indicate that she is able to be influenced on this subject, which means we have to work on influencing her and convincing her that this is the right way to win, like Nathan is talking about. The second point, though, is a little darker one, unfortunately, which is that even if Harris wins, she doesn't take office until January.
Yeah.
In the meantime, Biden seems committed to this path. Famine is rampant. They lack clean drinking water and food. The IDF continues to go after Hamas with no regard for civilian casualties, and hundreds, if not thousands more, could die in this conflict before Harris even gets an opportunity to take office, which means that we need to make the case that it's the best thing overall for Democrats in general, not just Harris, that the Biden administration take action right away. That's the kind of thing we have to be pushing for, because I don't know that he will, because he's so committed to this strategy and so perfectly committed to the Israeli government's path and following their lead, but there's no choice. And now it's time for one of our favorite segments, a miscellaneous What the Fuck. So Nathan, what is a miscellaneous What the Fuck?
Well, Michael, I'll tell you what the fuck a miscellaneous What the Fuck is. So we have a segment for Ass Hat of the Week for particularly heinous individuals, and we have a segment for the Dershowitz bags, who are just people that make terrible, self-defeating arguments. But every now and then, our story grabs our attention that doesn't really fall into either of those categories, but they're funny and silly and make us just say, what the fuck?
Yeah, seriously.
Miscellaneously.
Yeah, this story definitely falls into that category. It's kind of fucking outrageous.
Yeah. So maybe funny and silly, but also in a very sad way.
Yeah, this is a frustrating one.
Yeah. So, Michael, what is our miscellaneous what the fuck this week?
Okay, so if you have been living under a rock, you may not be aware that the Olympics, the Summer Olympics, just occurred in Paris. One of the games at the Olympics is boxing. In this case, we're specifically talking about female, boxing for female contenders. And so for this particular case, we have Imani Khalif, who is an Algerian boxer who won gold in the women's 66 kilogram division at the Paris Olympics. So you might think, why is that a miscellaneous what the fuck? Well, that isn't. However, unfortunately, the response to Khalif winning gold has been a total shit show. So when she was competing, she faced an opponent named Angela Carini from Italy, who just 46 seconds into the fight, abandoned the fight, telling reporters that after the match that she pulled out because she felt something wasn't right. So I think she was hit like one time and then like pulled out of the match. And then Khalif went on to win gold. And this sparked a huge response because of two things. First off, Khalif has some masculine looking features, right? And the International Boxing Association president, Umar Kremlev, told a Russian news agency that Khalif has both X and Y chromosomes, despite having no evidence of this. In fact, it was proved later that she is indeed biologically female. She is a cis woman. But this did not stop Republicans from going absolutely apeshit on this stuff. So Lauren Boebert tweeted, "This crap has gone too far. Save women's sports." Ted Cruz tweeted, "It used to be that men were taught not to hit women. Now it's a virtue signal." J.K. Rowling came after her. Elon Musk came after her. Trump came after her. It's fucking crazy. And these people are literally attacking a cis woman because they're obsessed with people looking feminine.
I would just like to point out, like, to the person that initially pulled out of the boxing match after like one punch, I just like to point out, like, if you go to the Olympics and you go up against another boxer in the Olympics, you should probably expect them to hit hard.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like you're in the fucking Olympics.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Seriously.
I
mean, and look, this is the issue when you have these movements that are just completely built off of hate.
Yeah.
It's eventually like, it's like the thing about hate is that it's like a bomb. All right. It doesn't discriminate. It's very bad at discriminating. Yeah. All right. It's very easy for people that are not even necessarily within the initial group that you hate to be caught up in the crossfire.
And that's also particularly a problem with this particular hate-fueled movement, which like is essentially requires that you compare, that you make conclusions about a person based on the way that they look, and then without any like evidence. Like it's a purely ignorant perspective. Like I have been more and more tempted as like I hear people make like anti-trans claims and stuff to be like, well, check. Like not actually check, but like in like social situations, like you'll hear someone be like complain about trans issues and stuff, and it's like, well, you don't know that person's not a man. Have you ever seen their genitals? No. You're just assuming that based on the information that you've been told by like it's an evidence-free exercise. And this is just such a glaring example of that. It's just like people making up their own fucking stupid, shitty, uninformed conclusions and using it to bend it to their narrative. And it just, to your point, it just gets everybody like caught up in it because it's just about hating people. It's not about being right or doing good things or anything. It's awful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. But on a little bit of a bright note, she is filing a legal complaint, suing a bunch of people, including former President Donald Trump, author J.K. Rowling, and Elon Musk, because of their role in instigating cyberbullying against her on the basis of gender, which, because she was in France and filed it in France, is a lawsuit that she can bring. So Paris prosecutors confirmed that they have received a case from Khalif filed specifically combating online hate speech instigated by these individuals. So pretty fucking cool that she's actually able to like fight back a little bit against these fucking hateful people.
Yeah. I mean, look, normally, obviously, normally I err on the side of free speech, but this is very clearly an instance of defamation of character.
Yeah.
Like this is a clear-cut case of defamation. So, fucking good for her.
Yeah. I mean, if France has a fucking tort that enables you to sue someone for cyberbullying, that seems like a pretty reasonable thing to bring in this case.
Yeah.
Yep. So that is a miscellaneous what the fuck. All right. And now we will end our show as we usually do with our highlights. So Nathan, what's your highlight this week?
My highlight this week is that this last weekend, my parents came over.
Nice.
And it was really nice to have them visit. And it was really nice to have them, have them be an extra arm to hold the baby and take care of the baby. And it was just a good visit. It was good to have them over.
Nice.
I mean, it's interesting because for the longest time, when you have your own place, company always feels like it's stressful, right? Like, because you have to get everything ready. But honestly, a lot of the time when my parents come over, since we had the kid, like those visits are actually less stressful because it's more
helpful.
people that can. Yeah, it's helpful.
Yeah.
It's helpful. So it was really nice.
Nice. That's great.
Yeah. What about you, Michael? What was your highlight?
My highlight is that I am about to go on vacation, which I'm so thrilled about. It is, things have been busy and tired, and I'm really excited for it. And with that, we'll thank the amazing people that make this show possible. So thank you to our patrons, Jerry DeViller, Fade Out Scoop, Kyle Chaska, Taylor Bloom, and Tobias Janssen for supporting the show. Thank you to our editor, Kayla, for all they do to make this show possible. And thank you, dear listener, for listening to The Perspectrum. And you'll hear from us again.